We love spices and flavoring mixes when we're cooking. Therefore, it's crucial to learn how to keep them fresh and tasty as long as possible when you've got them on a boat. Hi there, I'm Carolyn Sherlock, and on this episode of the Galley podcast, I'll share my best tips for storing your spices and mixes so they don't go to waste before you use them up. Life is too short to be uncomfortable on your boat, so don't be. Port visor rain shields from Seaworthy Goods provide ventilation while keeping the rain out. I love them. They're made from tough UV-resistant Lexan and install easily without tools, using their attached 3M adhesive tape. Visit seaworthygoods.com to learn more and coupon code SMARTBOATSTUFF10. That's Smart Boat Stuff and the number 10 for an exclusive 10% off your next order. Seaworthy Goods. They have smart stuff for smart boaters. Okay, let's talk about storing spices and mix packets on your boat. Did you ever make a pot of chili and notice that it's just not as spicy as usual, or your garlic shrimp just isn't very garlicky? Spices seem to be one of the hardest things to store on a boat. Not that containers break or critters invade. It's just that spices can lose their flavor quickly in the typical storage conditions aboard a boat. And the whole point of spices is to add flavor, so you want them to be flavorful. Mix packets are another problem. There's nothing like scoring a find of taco mix or something. A place like Bahamas, you buy several packets, and then when you go to use some a month later, opening the packet and discovering it's a hard lump that's starting to mold. Believe me, I've done it. Keeping your spices and mix packets in good shape takes a bit of work, and you probably won't end up storing them in the most convenient spot, particularly if you're in the tropics. The two enemies of spices and mix packets are the heat and moisture. While these are both obviously abundant in the tropics, you have to watch out even in the upper Midwest in the summer, particularly if you don't live aboard full time. I grew up in Michigan and know well how hot a closed up boat can get in the summer. So, what can you do to ensure that your spices are flavorful? First of all, buy small containers of spices. I try not to buy more of any spice than I'm likely to use in 6 months. On one hand, this bugs me, as large containers cost less per ounce. But what I have to consider is how much a particular size will cost me over the amount of time that I actually use it. If a large container costs $5 and I have to throw half of it away after 6 months, it costs me $5 for that 6 months. If a smaller container costs $4, but is pretty well used up in 6 months, well, I saved $1. The next thing is don't stock ahead. Normally, I like to keep a stock of various foods on hand, particularly things that can be hard to find wherever we're cruising. That doesn't work well with spices in packets. For spices, I wait until I'm almost out of an item to buy more. If I can't find it immediately, sometimes that means I just have to do without it for a while. Now, for packets, I don't buy more than what we'll use in the next 6 months. And I only buy more when I use them. When I buy packets, I've learned to shake each one to make sure that the contents aren't already lumped. During the course of our 17 years of full-time cruising, I also got so that I used fewer and fewer packets, primarily because it was hard to find ones that hadn't already picked up moisture in the places we were. While packets seemed like such a good idea for quickly making some things, I found that making things from scratch didn't take much more time, and the results were far more predictable than hoping the packet contents would still be in good shape. Now, the next one is using the oldest first. With spices, it's usually easy to find, to use up the oldest first. It's the one that's open. For packets, I made a practice to put the new ones behind the old ones when putting them away. Next thing is always make sure that your spice containers are airtight. Outside the US, spices are often sold in bulk or in small cellophane bags. Even in the US, spices sold in metal containers with plastic flip tops usually aren't airtight. You can either put spice containers inside freezer bags like the silicone bags or Ziploc bags, or you can transfer your spices to airtight containers. Also put the packets into airtight containers. That hugely, hugely helps. You can either use one large container or several smaller ones, depending on where you're going to put it. That actually is kind of the final point. You need to store your spices and packets in the coolest spots in the boat. All too often, boats come with spice racks that are either over or next to the stove, or nice and high, maybe on the adjacent wall. Unfortunately, these really convenient spots are about the worst for preserving the life of your spices. You need to keep spices and packet mixes and things like that as far away from the heat of the stove and oven as possible. Since heat rises, you also want to keep them low. On our monohull back when we started cruising, I did some tests with a thermometer and discovered that in our galley, even when the stove was not on, it was at least 20 degrees warmer near the ceiling than the floor during hot weather in the summertime. Therefore, I kept my spices in a drawer that was just off the floor and plastic bin of packets in a locker that was under our settee. Extras of both were under the floor. Those sorts of things went a long ways to helping my spices, putting them first in the airtight container and then putting them low instead of in a hot spot. Okay, that's it for this episode of the Boat Galley podcast. I hope you found it interesting and, more importantly, informative. Please tell your friends about us and be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Till next week.